Good afternoon. I'm Mark Walker. I teach the Manufacturing Innovation class here at Terrace High School. And right now I'd like to talk to you about casting. And there's 3 steps in which we'll go over. The prep for the casting, the gating to actually get it ready to cast the metal, and the investment. The investment will be done at a separate time. All I want to speak about right now would be the prep and the gate. So let's start with the prep. First of all, we need a can. We need a can to actually put the image that we're going to cast in, okay? And I need a cap, like a can. So the can goes on the cap like this. Inside would be the image. And right now, I want to show you how to prep the can. If you'll notice, there are perforated holes in this can right here, and we don't want to put water or investment in here because it will pour out. So we want to put a shrink wrap piece of plastic over this to prevent that from happening. And I have the shrink wrap right here, and these come in a big bundle, and all I'm going to do to help me get this over this round can is to put my hand inside and open it up. And I'm going to put the wrap over the can just like that, and I'm going to put it down like that. I take a heat gun and I heat this up, and it shrinks nice and tight, and that helps prevent anything from coming out, meaning the investment, which is a water and plaster based. Now, I want to talk about gating. I want to gate the bear. Gating is a term used for getting metal to the pattern. If you go home and look underneath your sink, you'll find plumbing that gets rid of the water after you wash dishes. The same way with gating the wax is not to get the metal out, but to put the metal in. You have to have an avenue for the metal to go into the pattern. You have a bear here, but it is actually, to me, is a pattern. We want to take the pattern and get it in bronze. And in this case, the pattern is a bear. Now, the plumbing I use for the pattern is what's called gate wax, sprue wax, and what I say for you guys is plumbing. It comes in different sizes, comes in different lengths. This is a square gate, and it also comes in round, it comes flat, it comes in various shapes to gate various images, one being this bear. In order to cut the wax, I put the wax in hot water, and I have hot water in here right now, and you leave it in there for a few minutes, and now you can take it and you can bend the plumbing any way you want. And as long as it's warm, it bends nicely. If you have wax that is not warm, it's really hard to bend. Sometimes this wax will break. So the best thing to do is get a container and put warm water in it and put the wax in there so it's easy to bend. It's easy to cut. It's also easy to solder when you melt the gate onto the pattern. So right now, I'm going to gate the pattern. I'm going to plumb it. And I'm going to take this piece of wax here, and I'm going to cut it down the center, right down there like that. And I'm going to open it up. This gate right here goes right there behind the heels of the back feet, right there. I still need to connect one from the tail to here. So I'll take a piece of wax here, I'll cut it. Now that I have my 3 pieces cut, I'll put this here like this, and I'll put this one here, and just see if it fits. It does fit. But I need to solder the pieces together. I cannot solder the wax together like this because it's not connected very well. Now it sticks, but I need to make it a very solid one piece of wax for the flow of the metal. So what I do is I take this, I cut it at an angle to where it fits, nice and tight, just like that. I take this, I take the gate system and I place it on top of the bear where I think it's going to fit, and it fits pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've seen that it's going to fit, I'm going to solder this piece onto this piece. Now, this is square wax. I have to solder on all four sides. So I'm going to solder right here. I'm hardly applying any pressure. The tip is pretty hot and it melts that wax real well. And I'm going to, you can blow on this, or you can put this in some cold water and it will chill that wax and harden it. Now I have to do this side of the wax. I'm going to melt it. I've just melted it. There, it's melted. Now that I have it like this, I'm pretty much ready to attach it to the bear. Do you see this piece right here? It has to be vertical. That's not vertical. But that's vertical. Now I have to melt the bottom here, here, and here. I'm going to melt it to soften the wax up, so when I place it on here, it will stick, so I can then come back and solder it. You can either melt it off with the tool, you could cut it with the putty knife. By melting it like this, it softens the wax to the point to where when you attach it to the pattern, it will stick to it. Just like that. It's stuck on the tail, stuck on the back leg here, and there, it's stuck. So now it's not going to fall off. I'm not going to drop it on the floor. I can then take this and I can hold it horizontal. If I melt the wax here, it's going to drip down and get rid of all the fine detail on this leg. Same here by the tail. I like to solder everything together when it's horizontal so it won't drip. So now I'm going to solder the tail here, and I'm going to solder the back of the leg here, and on the inside of the other leg. I know the wax won't melt. I still have the top part to do of the tail here. That's done. I have the top part of the inside there and there. It's very, very important that when you solder the gate system onto your pattern, that you melt the wax all the way around. Do not leave any spot untouched. And there is a reason for that that I'll go over when we go over investments. But for now, I just want you to know that it has to be soldered together all the way around. Now this piece is soldered all the way around here on all four sides, all four sides, all four sides. And this is all that needs to be done for this pattern to be cast. So now that we have this gated, plumbed up, I'm going to put it on the cap. And first of all, if I put the gate system right here in the center of the cap, I'm going to take the can, I'm going to put the can right on top of the rubber cap right here. And if you can see, that bear is right at the top of the can. It cannot be at the top of the can. It has to be someplace right around an inch to a half an inch from the top. So what do? you take this and you make this smaller. And I'm just going to cut it. Now I'm going to put it here like this. I'm going to set the can on the edge of the cap. Look at that. It's right about the right height. I like to get it about right on that last row of holes, right there. So this cap here has a rubber mound right here, and I will discuss this when we do investments. This one does not have it, so I have to make one. And I have a piece of wax right here that I'll make it with. I'm going to melt this wax so it's sticky. I'm going to force it right down on the top, just like this. Now, I'm going to melt the wax onto the rubber cap. The rubber cap is silicone based. It's a silica rubber. And it's not gonna melt the rubber at all. And I'm just going to stick this on there. Just like so. This has to be done fairly well because there. A little bit more. And I'm going to run the soldering tool over the whole top so it's nice and hot and soft, so that when I apply pressure with the gate system here, I'll be able to mold it. It's almost warm enough so it feels like clay. I'm going to push down on it like that. I'm going to come here with the can and I'm going to go, wow, not bad. It's a proper height. And I know it's going to fit in the can, so I'm just going to position it like this. And by melting the wax piece in here, I'm able to melt this wax gate to the wax part here I just put in. It was just a ball of clay, wax. I'm going to come in and I'm going to melt the wax together so it won't fall off. I'm going to spin it, melt a little bit more. Again, like you did on the sprue system, where you melted it all the way around in 4 spots, I'm doing the same here. There. It's in the center. I'm going to take the can now. This is very important to do. I'm going to put the can over it, and I'm going to make sure that the bear on the inside does not touch the side of the can anywhere. It has to be in the center. So I usually take the can and look at it like this, and it's not touching anywhere at all, so I know it's going to fit. And at this stage, I'll take the can off. Now that the pattern is positioned on the cap and it's soldered down via wax, it's not going to move. I can pick it up. It's not going to fall. I'm going to put the can over it like this to check to see if I have space all the way around the can, which I do. And you can see that it has space all the way around the bear. It cannot touch that can at all. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to prep the can so I can place it onto the cap with the bear to do the investment. These come in shrink wrap sheets, and they come in different sizes. This size is meant for this can, which is 4 by 6. I'm going to put my hand inside the shrink wrap to open it up, and I'm going to place it over the top of the can. I'm going to pull it down all the way to the bottom. Now, don't cut or remove this. That's done after we put the heat gun to it. So what's going to happen is we're going to put the heat gun to this, and it's going to tighten this up around all these holes. That way it's going to be like a glass where you can pour something into it and it's not going to leak at all. So I have a heat gun. You can shrink this with several pieces of equipment in the classroom, but this by far is the best. It's the safest. Now what I'm going to do is I've done this a long time, so I'm not going to get it very close. I'm just going to kind of wave it. I'm going to spin it. Okay, now I'm just going to, about 4 inches away. Now I'm going to go around the top rather quickly. I'm going to run it down the sides just a little bit. I'm staying probably about maybe, I don't know, 5 inches away. And I'll work it around. I'm done. After you do this, this area gets cut with an X-Acto knife and you remove it. I'll then cut this off, and then what I will do is I will place it over the bear. And I'm ready to do the investment. Good afternoon. I would like to discuss the use of a core pin. What I have here is some bronze wire. And I'm going to cut a piece of bronze wire to stick it through the pattern. Putting it on before the investment. Now, when you put the can over the pattern and you fill it up with investment, the investment will go all around the pattern and inside as well through the bottom of the feet. And it will fill up like a glass of water on the inside. And once the burnout process starts and we burn out the wax, there's a pattern inside, which is the mold of the inside of the bear in plaster. It can be rather heavy depending on what your pattern is. In order to keep the core in place, you need to install a pin. If you'll notice, the plaster will come out the holes and it will fill up, and it will be supported here, but if they break, the core will fall inside. So I install a pin to hold the plaster core inside in place. And this wax is hard. And so you want to get it in there. If I push too hard, I could break the gate system. I could break the pattern. So what I'm going to do is I rotate it just a little bit because it's got a little bit. There you go, and it's in. And I'm going to run it all the way through to the other side. And you need to be careful. I've put pins in before and I've broken my wax. And I can feel it coming through the other side, and there you go. When you pour the bronze in here, it does not adhere to this pin or a metal pin. This pin will then come out, and this hole here and the hole over here will be welded up, and then the texture will be chased back in on the bronze once it's cast. Now it's time to put the cap on. I'm going to put the cap on like this. I'm going to double check the inside to make sure that the wax pattern doesn't hit the side of the can like we talked about earlier. Now, these lids sometimes can be a little loose. If I fill this with plaster investment, it is going to leak out here. And so I have some clay, and I've already got it stiffened up, and I'm going to take little pieces of clay, and I'm going to place them on the rubber cap and on the can flange right here, all the way around to prevent any leakage. When you're doing investments, You don't want any leakage because you only have about 9 minutes to work with the investment material before it starts to harden. And there we go. I'm going to double check inside to make sure that it is still in position, which it is. And I'm ready to proceed with doing the investment. Now, the next process is doing the investment. There's several ways of doing this, and after doing it for several years, I've come up with a method that works quite well. But using the investment material, I'm going to wear a mask for the dust. I always use cold water. Don't ever use warm water or hot water. The material will set quicker than what it should. Always cold water. So I put the water in here, the amount I need. Now I'm going to put it in the mixer. I've been using the mixer now for about a year. And I fill it up with water. So now I have the water. It's cold. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the investment. I'm going to get the container in the investment box. I'm going to fill it up with the investment material right here. I'm going to put it in the mixer. And I'm going to get another scoop. This is critical. What I like to do is have enough investment material in here to have a little island. And there's an island right there above the water line. And I'm going to then put it on the mixer. So I'm going to take the lid, put it on top, and I'm going to hold down on the mixer, and I'm going to turn it on. It's 2 settings. Could be 2, could be 3, could be 1. I'm going to go 2. But the part about mixing it is you want it thoroughly mixed. You don't want to have any lumps inside, any powder floating in the top. It has to be thoroughly mixed. Remember, I mixed it and I introduced air into the mixture. And the next process will take the air out of the mixture. I carefully take this off the mixer and I pour it right in here. So I'm going to pour the mixture in all the way to the top. I'm going to take the mixture and set it on top of the vacuum machine, which will pull the air out of the mixture. Put the top on. Okay, I'm going to turn the machine on, and I'm going to go to invest. Oh, it's working good. Do you see the investment material come up and over? This is an indication that you have a very good vacuum going on right now. And once I turn this machine off, you will see the bubbles stop. Now, when doing the investment, it's another 2 minutes. And this base is on springs, so I can rattle it and get that process started quicker. I'm checking to see, to make sure the investment's not setting up, because it sets up relatively quick. So I'm going to turn the vacuum off. I've turned the vacuum machine off. I'm going to remove the lid. If you leave the vacuum machine on and you try to remove the lid, it's not coming off because it's under vacuum. And I'm going to fill up just a little bit on top. And the vacuum process is complete. Now that this is gonna, we're done with the vacuum process, this will set up in about 2 minutes. It needs to set between an hour and 2 hours before you put it in the kiln. You can let this set out overnight in a plastic bag with a couple moist paper towels in it, and you can put it in the next day. Generally, when I do investments, I put them in later that same day and pour the very next day. The castings are less likely to fail for a number of reasons. And so this is the stage in which I wanted to get to before we pour bronze, which would be the next day. Now, the next process, since the investment is done, is to take the shrink wrap off, take the cap off the bottom, and clean this up a little bit down here. So on these cans, they're perforated. And there's one area here where I believe they weld the can together, and it's ample space to cut the plastic off. Never have your finger in front of the blade, okay? Always down like this. And then this will come right off like this. And you'll notice there's several layers on here because I had a few holes. And there you go again. You can see where the investment has dried right here. Now, I'm going to unscrew this. This is part of the cap system. To take it off. This is the top of the investment. It goes in the machine like this. This is where we pour the metal into after the wax has been burnt out. So this is going to go in a kiln for 9 hours. The wax will completely disintegrate to where when you look inside tomorrow morning, it is going to be white as this. The clay cannot go in there because the clay will catch fire. The wax will catch fire too. And I'm going to take the spatula, the putty knife, and I'm going to take all this clay off. And right in here like this. The clay is reusable, but when you use the clay for keeping it from leaking, then the clay's no good. You must throw the clay away. And I don't use water-based clay. This is oil-based clay. I don't use water-based clay because it doesn't stick as well. And on here, you'll see the flange right here. That has to come off, and it comes off relatively easy, just like this. Scrape it off like this. It's easier to do it now than to do it after the burnout. The burnout is 9 hours. It burns all the way up to about 1300 degrees. And it's pretty much ready to go. So now we're here outside to put the investment in the burnout kiln. We're outside because there is some fumes that start when the burnout starts to melt the wax. It's got to be outside. Here is the investment, and here is the top of the investment, and here's the bottom of the investment right here. You can see the wax. That wax will burn out at 1300 degrees within 9 hours. And tomorrow when we pull this out of the kiln, I'll have some tongs holding it. And you'll be able to see down inside and see where the bronze is going to be poured. Now I'm going to put this in the kiln. And when I put it in the kiln, it has to rest on a stone. So there's space down here where the wax can melt out. And okay, now, so you're going to hear me. Here we have just put it in the furnace. You'll see that it's leaning on one side. So there's a space underneath the investment can to allow the wax to start to drip and then incinerate throughout the process of burning out to 1300 degrees. Right now, it's wanting me to run through the profile. And I'm going to push start, which is going to go through the profile, and at the very end, it's going to read 47 to 48 degrees, and it will turn on automatically. So here we go. And there, it's ready to go. It will turn on. You'll see the red light. And I'm going to shut the door. And let's wait here a second, make sure it turns on. Now you just saw it come on. I don't know if you heard it, but this red light comes on indicating that it is now on and starting the process of ramping up to a certain degree, and then holding for a certain amount of time. Till this process goes all the way up to 1300 and comes all the way down to 900, and will hold there until I come in tomorrow and turn the kiln off. The investment has set overnight. I'm now going to open it up. I'll take the investment out, then I will turn off the kiln. The investment is totally burnt out. You can see that the wax is gone. It's a nice white color, meaning that there's no residue of wax left in the investment. If there's any residue in there, it would have showed up this dark gray color. When I pour the bronze, it would have caught fire. I'm going to turn the kiln off. Now we're ready for the next process. Okay, this is the igniter, so I don't have to have a match or anything. There's gas and there's air. I check my gauges to make sure I got the pressure just right. Tanks are full. If you watch, you'll see this bronze get really hot and it just melt. I adjust the heat a little bit. What I just took out of there was plaster from the core inside the one object in there. Put a little bit of borax in here. It cleans the metal, brings the impurities to the surface when it totally melts and it's liquefied. The torch is probably at about 3,000 degrees. And by the time the metal's ready to pour, it's probably going to be closer to 2,500, maybe a little hotter. The borax also helps the bronze melt. Now, it's not totally melted, but it's liquid on the surface. So what's happening now is it's an insulator for the bronze underneath, meaning it's not allowing the heat to get down to that metal. So eventually it will, but to make it melt quicker, I lean the crucible one way so I can get that fluid away from it and I can melt it. I'll take a used screwdriver and get some of that stuff off the top. I can still feel at the bottom that it's solid, so it's not quite melted yet. Put a little bit more borax in there to help melt it and clean it. Now I'm going to shift it around to the spout. It's hard to tell the spout right now because the crucible's a little old, but you can use these things for a while. Now it's pretty much melted. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit more, clean it up. I'm going to grab the investment tightly. Turn off the torch. Grab the crucible, turn it on, vacuum. It's now complete. I'll light. And what I'm going to do is pour out the excess in the crucible. And I can pour it out into the sand. And then when I remelt it next time, the sand will float to the surface and I'll skim it off the top. There you go. Turn off the torch. I'll take the piece of extra bronze and put it in here so I don't lose it. Put this to the side, and I'll grab the investment. Usually I like to lay these crucibles down so they don't fall out. They're going to be hot for a while. Grab this nice and tight. I'm going to walk over and we're going to put it in the bucket. The color is gone from the bronze. You don't normally want to put an investment in the water to cool it when it's red. So I'll wait till I see the bronze color. These droplets up top, they're gas escaping from the pour. I'm going to put in this bucket full of water. You may hear it sizzle. So it's still very, very hot, and you can hear it. So pull it out. Go in and grab the can, pull it out, and you can see now that the investment is partially gone. And there's the bronze, and there's our pattern down in there. So I'm going to put it in the water one more time, and I have a screwdriver. There's the can.
Hold it steady. He's been shot with an arrow. Okay, now.
Here's the pattern. If you remember from the pattern itself, there are the gates. Here's the core vent that we put in there, right there. And this is what I call the button. There you go. There you have it. I've turned the bandsaw off. I've pulled it back through the blade. I'm going to spin it. I'm going to cut the other two gate systems right here, releasing the pattern from the gate system, and I'll remelt the gate system, and there's just a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done on the bear.